All right. Hello. I'm actually very excited today because I'm here with Kyle Poyar from OpenView, the creators or the inventors of the concept of PLG. Let's not talk about PLG immediately because I think we can go for hours, but maybe we should start with saying, how are you? And thank you for being with us today. And if you can give us a quick introduction about your experience and everything that you want to share as an introduction.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks for having me on. So I am an operating partner at OpenView. OpenView is a VC firm that invests in business software companies. We've got about 30 portfolio companies. Examples include Datadog, Expensify, User Testing, and Calendly. So a number of companies that many folks are probably familiar with from their everyday life. And in my role, I work with the portfolio leadership teams around revenue growth and go-to-market strategy. It's been a really fun ride getting to work with incredible companies. And I came to OpenView from a consulting background. I spent 6 years in strategy consulting at Simon Kucher, not a super well-known firm, but was the world's leading firm focusing on pricing and packaging. And I actually priced everything from diapers to caskets while I was there. So my fun fact is that I know pricing from cradle to grave.
There's a lot that I can unpack in there. And I think the first thing that I want to talk about is actually obviously the name of companies that you mentioned. If you look at all of the experiences that they provide to their users, it is just exceptional, right? Like Calendly, for example, is an exceptional tool. It came not a long time ago, but when you go and start booking your meetings in it, it's just enjoyable. It's easy. It is, it's the opposite of what we would have experienced in the past, which is the frustrating software, the black and white, the gray, the ugly, the non-intuitive, that bugs all the time, but also doesn't sometimes help you do your job, which maybe sometimes give you a big impact on why you hate your job and why work does not work for you anymore. What do you think of this?
Well, absolutely. I mean, Calendly probably wouldn't exist if Outlook was a better product. People spend hours and hours of their day in email and even just doing the mundane task of scheduling meetings. And I think everyone has had that frustrating experience of, oh, can you do Tuesday at 6 p.m.? No, how about Wednesday at 3 p.m.? Oh, what time zone are you on? And then the back and forth, it might take 6, 7, 8 emails. And a number of folks have, executive assistants that can manage that on their behalf. But for the rest of us, we don't have that luxury, and we're trying to get our job done and keep getting bogged down by things that just are terrible experiences. And so it's a confluence of most products haven't really been built to solve the challenges of these individual users, these kind of frustrating small annoyances that we face at work. And users, kind of business folks, are just consumers, but at work. And we want everything to work like it does on our phone, this really frictionless, like beautiful, ideally experience. And so that's where companies like Calendly come in and say, hey, we're actually designing with that user in mind. We think from there, we can build a really strong business around it. And so I think with product-led growth, one way we think about it at OpenView is it's the end user era, recognizing that individuals, not just executives, are the most important constituents in software.
What makes a software change that perspective from the buyer to user? What are like the main things that you think of that help building a software for the user rather than the buyer?
Well, the first thing is where they focus. And so when you think about building a software product, you tend to think about jobs that you're taking on, jobs to be done. And so are you solving jobs that an individual user faces, or are you solving jobs that maybe an executive cares about? So a classic example you might think about is Salesforce, CRM types of solutions, massive product category. The problem that they solve is a system of record so that a CRO can understand the pipeline and help figure out how to drive more revenue growth get more insights and analytics into the best ways of doing that. But for an individual sales rep, they probably hate Salesforce. It's really hard for them to figure out what the next step is with a deal. They don't get any product information or kind of customer information in Salesforce. Even just the kind of task of updating notes, they probably have their notes in Google Docs, in Evernote, and then at the end of every week, they have to spend hours just copying and pasting meeting notes from other tools into Salesforce. It's just, so Salesforce at the very core was built with the idea of solving this thing that CROs care about, kind of at the expense of what an individual salesperson cares about. And so there's even a whole cottage ecosystem of tools, like Dooley as an example, that help sales reps automate their note-taking and immediately sync it to Salesforce. So there's a cottage industry of solving these end user annoyances created by not focusing on the end user in the first place. So that focus is the first thing. And then from there, you're looking at being able to make it really easy for folks to solve that pain point, and do it without talking to a person. And so I always think about it as, imagine you had to contact a sales rep in order to sign up for Uber. You probably would be like, well, screw this. It's not worth it. I don't really know what's in it for me. And so when we think about end user focused products, you can normally jump in, configure the product yourself, start seeing value, ideally within minutes, if not days, do it all for free before you're asked to pay. And then, it's this idea of you're delivering value to someone before you're capturing that value. And then, there are other parts that go into it. If you want to deliver value quickly, you need to make the product really intuitive, have a beautiful user experience, allow people to get support and answers to their questions in real time, without having to wait for days in order to talk to someone. But if you're not focused on user-specific problems and making it easy for them to use the product, every other bit of optimization isn't going to get you further.
It's interesting because if you go back to the first topic we started with, which is the Calendly and how it makes people's life better and more efficient, and then we think about the focus on the end user, you realize like the main thing that a software need to be solving is effectiveness of people. And then the visibility that comes to these C-level people should be the result and not only the main outcome that you come for the product actually for. So it's shifting this view from the value is visibility for the CRO to effectiveness for your team, because if your teams are effective enough, you will get the visibility anyway, because they are coming to the product and they are using it on a daily basis. They are enjoying it. And then, the visibility comes as an easy outcome from that software. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. Well, and I think it's important to even compare what the previous paradigm was. And you think about an executive would be contacting a software company, spending weeks, if not months, probably months, going through different demos of the product, bringing in other stakeholders, maybe talking to references, going back and forth on a proposal, doing security reviews, legal. It would be months and very expensive purchases, lengthy upfront commitments, just to kind of buy the software. And then it might take another number of weeks or months just to get the software implemented in your technical environment. And then the idea was, okay, now that it's set up, well, we'll just do a couple trainings for the team that's going to need to use the product, and then they'll be good to go. They'll figure it out. And what a lot of folks realize after the fact is that people never use the product. It was really painful as an experience. It wasn't intuitive, didn't make sense. They might make errors, or they might just start logging into it occasionally, only when they absolutely need to. And then you look back at the end of the year and the product didn't solve any of the things that you bought it for. And then the data that you get from having it as a workflow tool all of a sudden become irrelevant, because the data is only as good as you have information from people using the product. And so I think that there's a realization that this old way of buying, it was just fundamentally broken, not just because users hated the products, but it just never delivered on the promise that the products were supposed to provide in the first place.
And that's actually a very good point, because I think when you go to some software and they tell you, oh, our North Star is not the monthly active user or the weekly active user or the daily active user, and you question them like on the why, they always come back to these blockers that they have in their mindset, which is, oh, but I got the money, I got the ARR up, and I'm pleasing to the buyer. Why would I need the MAU to be my North Star metric at that point? And I think it's interesting because for me, any software business in the world, whatever you're solving for, whether it's accounting or finance or a productivity tool, whatever, your North Star or like the main objective that you need to be measuring your success on is actually this monthly active user or actually daily active user. Because if your employees are not getting value out of it, you should really consider not using the software in the first place.
Absolutely. Well, and executives want to delegate to their team to inform what they buy in the first place. They're busy. They don't have their full-time job is not evaluating software. So they're gonna say, hey, are you using this? Are you seeing value in it? They're gonna look at that when it comes to renewing. But then also, these dozens or hundreds of users could become huge champions. They go on to other jobs. And if they like your software, they're gonna advocate for it on your behalf. They have peers, they can write reviews, they can be a huge asset if they're actually seeing value. And I think a great example is an Australian company called Deputy. They're an OpenView portfolio company, and they're in the workforce management space. So if you think about it, most people are hourly workers, whether you're a cafe worker, retail, restaurant, healthcare worker, and typically your manager probably came up with a schedule in Excel, didn't really consider your availability. They posted it probably really last minute, wasn't consistent for you. And then you might need to call in sick, days might not work. It's really hard for you to find someone else to take your shift. And then you have to track your time in a really kind of manual, painful way, literally like clocking in and clocking out. And Deputy said, well, why don't we actually make this whole thing way easier for everyone, where employees can swap shifts on their phone with whoever else is available. They get everything via a mobile app. They can clock in and clock out with just Face ID or a thumbprint. And they said scheduling is actually as much about the employee experience as it is about the manager's experience. And what's great is that a lot of folks who are working in an hourly business, you might work at a cafe and a retail shop or a cafe and a restaurant. And so these employees are the best advocates of bringing Deputy into new customers. And they tend to find that once they start getting traction in a city, it takes off because there's so much word of mouth and referrals from these employees that ultimately everyone's going to want to be a Deputy.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think I'm not going to talk about Cascade, which is like the platform that we have here, but it's the same concept, because even when you come to the strategy of companies, the best strategies that get really executed are the ones that are built by the teams. And this top-down versus bottom-up approach to anything is making sense in many ways, and the software needs to align to that. Because if you have a software that is always built from the top down, just like the schedule for the teams that are in restaurants, it's the same thing. If there's no adoption from the bottom up and accepting the schedule or being able to exchange it with another employee and be feeding into the overall schedule, then there will be frustration and friction along the way. I wanted to talk about this gap, because I think if you go back to everything we mentioned so far, there is kind of this decision maker in a company that is making a decision, and it has so much impact on everyone else in the business. But if these people are not involved in the decision or actually bringing these decisions up to them to just get a final approval in some ways, there's always something wrong going on. And I think this gap is maybe what is, let's say, making work not work again for people that are working for these companies. So maybe let's talk about this gap. And I think the gap maybe is around the tools, the skills, and the processes, right? What's your take on this? And where do you think the biggest problem is when it comes to this gap between leadership teams and teams on the ground?
It absolutely is a gap, although I think a lot of times it's a gap that comes from not necessarily from bad intentions, but from lack of information. And so if you're not able to test out a product, use it, on a free trial basis, you really don't know whether the team is going to like it. A demo where you're kind of watching the product on someone else's screen might look great, but you're taking a leap of faith. And I think a lot of folks they either don't realize they have an alternative, or they don't understand really the nuances enough of how big of a difference it can make to have a product that users love using versus they begrudgingly use occasionally only when they're absolutely required. And so I think that we're seeing more and more this phenomenon of end users being so fed up with these bad experiences that they're going out potentially against company security policies, starting to adopt these kinds of products on their own. So they sign up themselves and then start to integrate with other tools. They start telling their friends at work about it. And what happens is a couple of developers or a couple of salespeople, a couple of marketers become this sort of advocate for products internally, and then it ends up on the CIO's desk or the C whatever's desk as, hey, we're seeing a lot of value in it. Like, we got to buy this for the whole company. And so what I really like is that we're starting to see the power being shifted and end users actually taking control of the situation, and rather than just letting software be kind of decided for them, they're bringing their own voice to the table. And I think for a lot of companies, if you want to retain employees, which we're in the period of the Great Resignation, talent markets are crazy competitive, salaries are through the roof. The last thing you want to do is those employees. And so I think that right now, employees have a lot of power to try to craft the experiences on their own. I think that's the silver lining in this, is that work's not working, but you can do something about it.
Yeah, I love it. I think the three best analogies I heard recently about this entire concept of you have to try before, there are three that I love. The first one is you never go to a gym and pay the 1 year subscription if you didn't get the 2 weeks trial. And then you go, you see the machines, you see the classes, you see the people, you see the vibe, you see the music, and then you decide. The other one is actually cars. When you go to a car, like store to buy a car, they always let you drive it. They always let you go and have a tour around the city or like in the area to make a decision before you're spending that much money on the car. And the third one, which is my favorite, is you don't get married just based on a demo. You go into dinners, you go into drinks, you maybe first of all try something where you spend like 3 days in the week in the same apartment. You see how you see things.
It's like, where is this going?
Where is this going? It's like, I'm not gonna give you a proposal here, Kyle, no worries. But I think it's just
certain apps.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all about trying before making that decision. And I think there need to be a shift. I think it is what we're talking about here is really the shift that is mandatory, not almost optional, to give this like opportunity to people to try, to test, to make their own decision, but also like to make a decision with many other people at the same time. Now, the analogy with the marriage does not make sense here, but but it's more about like, that giving the option. So these are the three best analogies I've heard recently. If you have any additional analogies, let me know. But these are the one that I really enjoy when it comes to the free trial or even the freemium version of any software.
No, I think and again, it goes back to what people expect in their life as a consumer. I mean, with mobile games, right? You start to download the game. Most games are free to download. You start kind of getting hooked on it, and then they start charging you for like premium skins or extra lives or unlock new levels, and you are so bought in, you're spending hours a day on these games, then of course you're going to do it.
Yeah.
I think that the list goes on and on. Netflix is an example. If you've never seen some of the Netflix original content, you might say, well, why do I even want to be a subscriber in the first place? But you take that trial, you start seeing what's on Netflix, you maybe watch something that you didn't even know existed, and all of a sudden you're addicted to it, binging it all day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're absolutely going to be a subscriber at that point. And so I think that it's kind of a no-brainer from a business standpoint and from a customer standpoint. And I think from a business standpoint, you just get a lot more people engaging with your product, a lot more essentially leads, top of funnel activity, and the conversion rates end up being a lot better than people initially think that they'll be.
Absolutely. So talking about specific examples, I'm not going to go into the Netflix because I can binge a TV show in one day and then I can finish 30 of them in a month of trial. But I have a question that is, I think, interesting. Let's see. LinkedIn is my example here. So I've been talking to the team about how they should be engaging on LinkedIn and how they should be really looking for conversations on LinkedIn. And every time I was trying to show them what I do, I get blocked very quickly when I'm showing them on the website. And I go, oh, it's better when you do it on your app. Actually, it makes much more sense. And my question is more about this another gap, which is the gap between the software experience on desktop and on mobile. And obviously, we're sitting behind our laptops. We're doing most of the work on laptop. And a lot of the companies are investing so much on this experience now on desktop, but it does not meet the expectation that we have seen on mobile. And if we want to have employees getting as excited about the desktop version, we need to invest a bit more and make it look maybe like the mobile experience. What is your thought on this? And do you see, again, this gap happening? And what is the direction that companies should be taking?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think it varies a lot company to company. There are some products, I think probably too many software products, that target people who work behind desks all day, right? Who do have a laptop, who have a desktop, who have a Mac. And if you're targeting like professional, white collar employees, that's probably okay for the most part. But I think that, when I look at the software market landscape, there's a lot of people who don't sit behind a desk all day, or who have meetings and who work in the field. And historically, they've been really underserved with software, way more so than office employees. And I think for a lot of it is that the people who build software tend to be, white collar workers who've worked for other software companies. And so it's just, they don't have the field of vision or the kind of frame of reference of folks that might be in industries like manufacturing or construction or retail or hospitality. And so I think that for a lot of businesses, you might want to think, are there underserved parts of the market that your products aren't even reaching and you might not even realize it? And are those types of people, are they often behind a desk or are they mobile? And I think that the days of building a product for a construction kind of industry employee that has a desktop first approach, you're just not going to go very far as a business.
I have a very hard question maybe to end this conversation. So I'm going to speak about it, give context, and see how we go. But if you think about this global event that is coming and everyone is talking about, the Great Resignation, right? And this boom of people leaving their companies, you look at it and you look at the stats, you see that most of the predictions are happening towards the larger organizations where they have been struggling with digital transformation. It's been taking them years and they are failing. And when you ask them about their tech stack, they tell you that it's Excel files and PowerPoints, which is not a tech stack, but let's forget about it. And then you see that actually there's a relationship between, again, the software that companies are using or the tech stack and how people are feeling about staying with their business, if they are enjoying their companies, but also the feel of lack of innovation in the business is reflecting on them a heavy weight of saying, if my company cannot innovate, why am I staying here? So with all of the things that I spoke about, like digital transformation, innovation, great resignation, and talent retention, what is your advice to companies that are going through these, let's say, phases right now, whether they are big or small, and what are the main things that they should keep into account or take into account so they can avoid this great resignation?
Yeah, and it is fascinating because when we look at, for example, some of our portfolio companies that have been doing really well, they're actually not seeing the Great Resignation, and they don't have an issue with employee turnover. And so when I compare the companies that are seeing it versus not, a lot of it comes down to folks want to be part of something bigger than themselves. They want to be part of something that they think is meaningful, has a broader mission, and where they can see how their role has an impact beyond what their day-to-day is. And so I think that's obviously key for retaining employees, especially I think I can say this as a millennial or even the Gen Z folks out there. I think that for folks like us, that's more and more important when we're choosing a place to work. And then the other thing is that people now want a lot more flexibility and autonomy in their role. And so this idea of like going into an office and spending 9 to 5 in that office in a fluorescent light-filled cubicle environment with people that you don't actually want to see outside of work. I mean, the people realize with the pandemic, life is too short to put up with that. And a paycheck is important, but it might not be that important, or there might be other paychecks out there. And so when I think about from a business standpoint, you have to make sure that you are creating a culture and have a broad vision that you can communicate to your employees that gets them excited. And then you actually have to give your team a lot more independence and flexibility and trust that if they're bought into the mission and they want to have an impact, they're going to work hard and do the right things that actually ultimately get you where you're trying to go. One kind of aside on this, just as a tangent, I went to Brown University in the US that's known for having no required classes. It's you create your own curriculum, there's no core requirements. And when I was thinking about going, my aunt said, well, you could major in New England cemetery design if you went to Brown. Do you want to go to a college that allows you to major in New England cemetery design? And I was like, yes, absolutely. I'm not going to major in that. But they treat students as architects of their own education and give them the ability to carve out a path that is aligned with both where they want to go from a career perspective and their personal and kind of academic interests. And it ends up that 90+% of people take what would normally be the required classes, but they might do it in a different order, or they might kind of emphasize areas that you might not have realized that you were interested in. And I think that the modern company is going to be more like that. And so that's a long way of saying, when it goes back to how to do that, one of the most immediate visceral signals from an employee standpoint is technology. Do you have your choice of what kind of device you want to use? Are you stuck using kind of an outdated PC instead of a Mac? Do you have your choice in what software products you can use to be more productive at work and to automate some of the routine tasks or the really annoying things? And do you believe that the company values you as a person and values the impact that you're going to make? And there's a lot of micro kind of events that give people the feeling like, yes, this is true. I feel this, or no, it's not. And I think that that all feeds into this conversation of, for many companies, work is not working, and that's very evident from the technology decisions they make.
I love this. This was an amazing answer. I think just like summarizing here, sharing always the why, the mission of the company and the vision, and let teams go and get it in the best ways they believe they should be doing it. Show that you care about your employees, show they have a choice, show the flexibility, show they can come up with ideas and they can create and innovate, show that you can adapt, show that this culture is something that you want to create with them. The trust is a result of what you show them and how you care about them. And technology is key. So give them the choice in what they want to use, when they want to use it, and why they want to use it. Because ultimately, the best companies are the one who lead with vision and let their teams decide how to get there. Amazing. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think we tackled so many topics. So thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you did the same.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Awesome. Talk to you soon.